We're started.
Happy Jazz Cabbage Café.
Woo!
Hello.
We'll have others join us, but we start off with Ida Pearl-Lee from CannaCast of the Michigan Cannabis Industry Association.
Hi, everyone.
Joining us as co-host because she's so used and now a super professional at doing these things. So we're appreciative of that. And Rick, who's all here otherwise for those who aren't able to watch.
Well, of course, for all of our Alexa and Spotify podcast listeners, we have Deborah Young, our regular, who's super duper important. You know that. Deborah, say hi.
Hi.
And Jim Salame, not only a Jazz Cabbage regular, but Decriminalized Nature principal and the Entheo Show co-host, Jim Salame.
How are you? Good to see you.
And we're just joined now by Mr. Hashbash himself, Adam Brook, joining us from his home studios. Adam, welcome to the show.
Hey now, how you doing today?
We are always good. Jamie, back to you.
All right, well, let's check out our awesome sponsors in a second. All awesome people. In fact, I got my Girl Green swag on right now. They have a bunch of really cool shirts.
You have a really weird looking boob there, but I guess that's just a growth you have to have taken care of at some point.
It happens, just a condition.
Might have been the dog. I don't know. Just,
That's why I get my recommendation letter regularly. So.
Maybe the patient has of breast issues. All right. Put that one in the paper.
So,
It's valid.
hey, and then Colin McDougall has joined us, of course. And so I want to talk about last week real quick. I just think that was pretty cool. Kind of doing a tribute to Matt Abel, who's a longtime veteran of activism, decades in, and a lot of accomplishments, lawyer in the field, kind of nationally recognized, coming ready to finish a 10-year run as being executive director of Michigan NORML. And I think he was kind of touched by it. And we had some really cool people on to help celebrate. Adam was here again last week. And we'll be here again next week, too, by the way, because we're going to do the Rainbow Farm show.
It was a lot like This Is Your Life.
Yeah, it was kind of cool, man. I mean, everybody was pretty into it. It came together fairly quickly, but I mean, John Sinclair and Keith Stroup and everybody joined in, and Curtis and Chuck and Tim,
Sort of like a calm roast of Matt Abel. I mean, we didn't really beat him up or tell any embarrassing stories, but it was sort of a gathering of friends telling stories about his butt. Yeah.
And we saw the various old white guy problems with trying to use this technology and stuff on display.
That was the best. It was like
would be without it.
old dude.
I do not resemble that remark, man. What are you talking about?
It was not even you, but that was so hilarious.
It wasn't Rick Thompson this week.
Yeah.
So, and later on, we're going to have Russ Chambers, of course, Botanical Company in Franklin Fields, who are sponsors also. We just shown we're going to help with this discussion, and Daryl Stavros, and talk a little bit about their perspective, industry participant perspective. One of the things we're going to get into, of course, is this controversy surrounding what we know to be an effort to try to change limitations and restrictions for what caregivers can do to be more difficult and costly, and changes that we find are going backwards and not forwards, and we're concerned about the motivations for that, and we've had lots of discussions on it, and we're gonna continue to talk about that today. And and in this industry, there's a lot of really awesome participants. I just want to kind of highlight some of the differences between who's doing this and who's out there trying to just work their own operation and make the best out of that, and not necessarily be too concerned about what other people are doing and stuff. So we'll
call that staying in their lane.
Yeah, so we'll be able to find out if this concept of necessarily believing that all activity outside of this commercial world is a detriment to these huge investments and stuff is something that's shared by everybody who's involved. And I don't think it will be. We were going to be joined by Patrick Frakes today from Rare Cannabis. Unfortunately, he was in a little bit of a fender bender. He's going to be okay, but it was enough to like take him out of the rotation today. And we just are going to offer up our positive vibes to him and hope he's all right. And he said if he gets a chance, he might slip us a statement by text or something like that. But he really wanted to be on to talk
Jamie,
about.
Of course, also joining us too, Shelly Smith, who also is driving, and we're hoping no fender benders in that direction today.
Yeah.
One was enough for the Jazz Cabbage crew. Thank you very much.
She's trying to get in. Anyway, Patrick was really trying to get on because he's not one of these people that would like to see caregivers messed with at all. He understands the history here, and he kind of wanted to make that clear. But we'll be talking about this, and I'm sure one of the things we're going to describe is how we've been dealing with this in some form or another for a long time. I think Medical Mondays, we did a great job of kind of recounting a lot of these things, and I think we should kind of run through that a little bit, again during this show, and starting off right in 2009 with the Kuipers bill, the first attempt at eliminating caregivers in lieu of like 10 large distribution centers or 10 large gardens, which is a pattern that we saw nationally, thereafter, but certainly attempted here a few times.
That model's never been put forward anywhere, has it? There are limited licenses in some states, but not where the entity that was going to acquire those licenses went.
I think there's some versions of some really limited participation in some states. I'm not an expert. Michigan's kind of my thing, and I do pay attention a little bit to what's going on nationally. But
Ohio
for example,
was definitely put forward by the group of 10.
They tried, so obviously, and I forgot what year that was now. Was that 16 maybe, or?
Right around that
Responsible
time.
Ohio was 15, 16, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, and and that was that model, the oligopoly model as it was described. And had that been successful, people in other states, including Michigan, would have felt quite empowered to try to move that forward here. And as I said last night, I'd like to believe that even if they would have been successful in Ohio, that we still would have done a good job of fighting that. But good thing that we didn't have to be tested. But we continuously get tested. There was the MRC or something like that.
Yep, Michigan Responsibility Council.
Yep.
Yeah.
And they were after a similar model, and just this is going to show up probably for a while in different forms. There are people that really believe that this other activity is a big threat. And again, I want to point out too that this is tangible. This language. This is for a while we were talking abstractly. Like we know that there's this idea of trying to reduce the amount of plants that caregivers can have and make them have to have their medicine tested and tracked and things like that, even just for the directly connected patients. But we didn't have the actual language until a few days ago, because it's been circulated around to lawmakers. Now they're actually making a push to do that. So some of the particulars have shown up, which would be reducing per plant to 3 per patient and reducing total plant count to 12 and having to be in the metric system and all that kind of stuff. There's some implications about that we're going to go over too. Like if we were to actually do some of this stuff, what would it look like for the caregivers? How reasonable, practical is this? This actually is for all the people who support this, who are saying they're not after eradicating it. This is about as close as you get without actually saying it or saying that's what you're trying to do. It essentially, cripples the activity as it is, and there's no reason to peel back on it. Go ahead, Adam.
Oh, and I just like to point out that this is a minuscule amount of their problem. That the black market, which they never talk about, which if they want to say they're against any illicit, illegal marijuana activity, is just going to get them the same hatred. We've passed the point of criminalizing marijuana. If you have an issue in your community with something, it should certainly be a civil matter, and
right.
And this is, that's the next step. I hate to bastardize Frank Niemöller, but first they come for the communists, right? Well, first they come for the caregivers, and when they get the caregivers out of the way, then they're going to go after anything that's not within the limits.
Right. I was just about ready to get there, and then we're going to spin it around for everybody here. But you know, kind of what shows their ass a little bit more. And again, there is language they are responsible for that they're giving to lawmakers. I mean, it exists, and it also includes trying to make it really difficult for micro businesses to exceed possibly as well as they can. So there's no question that going after other businesses is already happening. It's not just this concern for caregivers and all this other kind of shit. It's concern for anything that's not them, as we keep on trying to point out. And so what's next after that? You know, other individual rights, other small and medium businesses, you know, that seems to be the path. And why do we have to put up with that? I don't think that we do, but you know, I'll tell you what, you know, we're going to spin this around and get people's thoughts on this. Rick, if you don't mind facilitating with that, but it sounds like Adam, the black market representative himself,
I just don't.
Would be a good way to get started, maybe.
I just don't understand how they think that this is anything other than a tragedy for them. That going against a system that, I mean, I try to be pretty honest. There are people in the black market who are taking full advantage of the fact that there is a legal and legitimate market, because that has changed the narrative. That means that the local police don't care about weed anymore. When the hotel manager calls and says, "Hey, I got a guy sitting in a car dealing weed in my parking lot," the Ann Arbor police say, "We don't respond to weed calls anymore." He's like, "Yeah, but this guy's dealing weed in my parking lot." He's like, "We don't respond to weed calls." That's Ann Arbor. We expect that. But that's what's coming everywhere, people. Because the reality is you can make weed legal all you want. The illicit market thanks you for it. It's a game changer. And these people haven't realized that they lost the battle or they won the battle, depending on how you look at it. You know, I think they won. I don't think they realized they won. You know, and they'll make plenty of money if they have a decent business model. So.
That's really that's the issue. I mean, and I know Jamie wanted to spin it around. I'll start off. First of all, let me support what Adam said previously about chasing caregivers being such a minuscule portion of the market. Let's talk about mathematics. There's about 7 million adults over 21 in the state of Michigan. Stats tell us that about 50% of the adults in states where cannabis is legal are occasional or regular consumers of cannabis. So your target market is about 3.5 million people. We just saw in an article from, I believe, Lansing City Pulse, that said there are 30,000 caregivers servicing about 72,000 patients in the state of Michigan. 72,000 patients is only 2% of that 3.5 million people that is our target market for the cannabis industry. So when you're trying to come down hard on 2% of the entire market, you're really misfocusing. Not only that, you're giving yourself a horrible reputation. Go ahead, Jamie.
Yeah, and it is a 2% that sets the pace for a lot of others. Also, that's the hardcore, active people in this culture, in this world. I mean, and they direct a lot. Maybe the minority, but it's a very vocal and knowledgeable and respected minority for a lot of other people to follow direction. When they spout off about things not going in the right direction, demonstrably, it's effective.
Don't forget,
they have belittle it if you want, you know, but
they have their own list of medical patients. They deal with them as customers. Mm-hmm. These people are all in the medical business. Have they thought to ask their medical patients if they should get rid of the caregiver system?
Well, you don't ask if you don't want to know the answer.
And did they just piss off a bunch of their customers?
Right.
Their known customers.
How's this, Adam? We know that because of text messaging, that some companies share their patient list or their customer list with other companies. They share text number or telephone numbers, email addresses for marketing purposes. So, I mean, the database has to be pretty damn huge, wouldn't you think, Jay?
I get multiple texts. I've never stepped into any of these dispensaries.
Right.
I've got a half a dozen of them on the hook. I get something every day from somebody.
Yeah. Yep. So the fact is, we talked about it being, and Jamie's right, that 2% is a small number of people to go after. By the way, Uncle Mikey, good to see you in the chat. Thanks so much. And our friend Mary from Ohio, thanks for kicking in too. when we talk about this issue, it's so multifaceted, but the one thing that stands out more clear than anything else is that the people who are pushing those goals that Jamie outlined a few minutes ago, they haven't thought out the consequences of their entire program. Later on, we're going to examine what would really happen if they made caregivers test all their cannabis prior to distributing to patients. Later on, we'll talk about what would really happen to the system if they made all caregivers record all of their sales transactions and growing cycles through the metric program. Wouldn't it be terrible? Would be horrible. So we'll talk about all of that in a few minutes because we got a lot of show to fill. But right now, I'd like to give it to Ida. She's our guest host today. Ida, this is a segment where we usually give everybody a couple minutes to talk about the subject itself before we really get into serious discussion about things.
Okay, well, I just want to give a background on myself real quick. So my daughter was born with 1p36 deletion syndrome, and she also suffered from Lennox-Gastaut, which is a rare form of seizure disorder. And instead of using pharmaceuticals, I wanted to switch over to medical marijuana. In doing so, we were discharged from the University of Michigan from neurology. I could not find another neurologist in the state to pick us up. I contacted Robin, and she said, "Do you want to go public?" And I said, "Of course. What do I do at this point?" And that's when I also found out that the tinctures and the oils and the lotions fell into a gray area. And so, I brought Bella to the Capitol for 5 years. We would pull, reps off the floor and talk to them and get them to understand, this is a quality of life. This is rights of life. It's a full spectrum plant. You can't make half of it legal and the other half illegal. So this is near and dear to my heart. My daughter, we were patients. We had caregivers. Almost $1,000 a month was donated to us in medicine. There's plenty to go around, and to speak to having the caregivers, test their medicine. At one point, they didn't want them to test their medicine, and now they're requiring them to test. Pick your battles here. There's so much going on. I mean, we're busy, helping with nanogram limits and billboard advertisings and, pediatric patients' rights. It's just, it blows my mind, that we're dealing with these issues.
It does seem kind of crazy, doesn't it? Especially, and we'll talk a little bit later about Steve Linder's personal history. And Jamie talked about walking through the timeline of how these things have been pursued by these people, and the same people have been pursuing the same issues for years and have just been unsuccessful. And this is the latest iteration of them trying to change things around. But I
would have never lobbied for caregivers. I mean, give me a break. They're the backbone of this industry.
Yep. At 30,000 strong now, we were 45 strong at one particular point. And remember, there were 500 dispensaries scattered across the state of Michigan, 300 in Detroit alone, all of them supplied by Caregiver Supply, and no history of illness ever from any of that. It was only when the regulated market came in, only when the regulated market hit, did we see vitamin E acetate and other stuff getting hit. I know you want to jump in, Adam.
And only medical patients buying that weed at the time.
That's correct. Yep. Everybody had to have a card.
Yep.
Deborah Young, big conversation, big topics. I know you got lots to say. Go.
Yeah, of course I agree with Ad on the black market thing. Everybody, a caregiver, if this type of shit comes down, caregivers are just go underground. Nobody's going to go away. Now, I'd like to know, a 12-plant limit, 3 plants per patient. Now I'm cut down to 4 patients. I assume 3 plus myself to reach this 12 plant. Which of my 3 patients extra do I cut off? I mean, who am I supposed to let go? I don't understand. What do they want me to decide? Which patient is in more need of my services than another? All my patients need my services.
They've decided that your patients only need like 1 to possibly 3 plants to take care of, and then they're okay.
It also cuts my patients down to 4 patients, Jamie, because 4 times 3 is 12, and
no, you can only have max.
Well, yeah, you can max out at 12, but you could still have your 5 patients. You'd have to dedicate like 1 plant or 2 plants to them or so.
That's ridiculous.
But that's what
Well,
happens.
it is ridiculous. Yeah,
it's absolutely ridiculous.
How don't understand the system.
Yeah, and there's and Jim and I were discussing this earlier. There's plenty in this industry to go around to everybody. There are people who utilize dispensaries. I am not one of them, and the people around me are not people who utilize dispensaries. But there are people who are casual weekend users, or they have occasional ache and pain, they go into dispensary. I mean, and that's the dispensary's niche. The caregivers is a different niche. Everybody can have a piece of this pie if you conduct yourself correctly. If you grow a good product and you offer it at a good price, you'll be okay. You know, those who have unrealistic business expectations or do not understand the cannabis industry are the ones who are initiating this. And it's not the caregiver's fault that they don't know how to operate a proper cannabis business. You know, it's not our fault. And we're not going to go away, and we're going to fight to the end. And if we lose on this, which I doubt we will, we'll go underground. I mean, because that's where we came from to begin with. I mean, we're used to it. We know how to do that. We know how to do it. Go ahead, Adam.
Well, that's to the point that was made about them not really have thought this out, because we pointed it out last night that let's say they get rid of the caregiver system. So now you got rid of 420. Awesome. Now you got rid of 30,000 caregivers, and now you got 70,000 patients that have to go where? Well, guess what? Those connections are already made. Those relationships are already made. These people came from underground. They came from the black market. They don't have to worry about their neighbors snitching on them anymore, because nobody knows what the laws are, and they're all confused anyways. And like I pointed out earlier, the game's changed. Right now. So what do these people think, or are they not thinking? And is that? I
think they're just not thinking. I mean, who goes after their customer base like that? I mean, who does
Green
that?
Peak.
I don't understand. Yeah. Well,
yeah, right.
I mean, that we see.
And
we see that
they're not truthful. These people. That's the biggest problem.
Yeah.
Is they're not being honest with themselves, their customers. You know.
Adam, I'm going to say that, and I'm going to kick this over to back to you in just a second here, Adam, for your bit. But let me just say, this speaks of a system that's being run by people who really don't have any idea how the cannabis industry works. They think that we are like blue jeans, and that if we don't like the price of blue jeans at 2 or 3 different places, too bad, we're going to buy them somewhere anyway. If we don't like the price of blue jeans, we'll just buy black market blue jeans. We'll just go someplace else. We don't have to depend upon that system. Having said that, I know most patients do visit dispensaries when their caregiver is out of stock or they want to try something different. They're looking for a product that their caregiver doesn't manufacture, like cartridges or like topicals. There's lots of reasons for patients to utilize the regulated market, unless you damage your reputation with the patients so badly that they say, 2 fingers straight up to you, I'll never step in your doors again. And then no matter how desperately they need it, they will not visit you. Adam, you're
the analogy I came up with in the middle of the night is these people have Walmarted themselves. There are people that don't shop at Walmart because they came into town and destroyed the small businesses.
That's right.
And they'll never forgive that. The fact that Walmart happens to have everything you could possibly need in one place. I might also add including insulin over the counter, which you don't need.
And including
anywhere else.
Counterfeit Girl Scout too.
I mean,
right. So the reality is that there are people that will not walk into a Walmart and will not do business with a Walmart. Yeah. And it's because of Walmart's business practices and their behavior when they came into the industry. And people don't forget that. And how these people don't understand that. And they're pushing and they keep pushing. And the things that they're pushing just show how little they understand and how little they care and how untruthful they are.
Yeah.
That's what kills me about them.
Yeah, and then they say one thing, like Ida was saying, they say one thing 1 minute, next minute. First they don't want us tested, now they want us tested. You don't know where the hell they're coming from. They're clutching at every angle because they don't understand business. They're not making money hand over fist the way they thought they would be because they're not conducting a good business. Those who are successful and those who aren't are bitching.
I've said this many times. Go ahead, Jamie.
No, I'm saying we still have Jim and Carolyn to get to before the guests come out.
Working on it.
I can't.
Sorry. Fact is, we've got people in this particular industry who are used to lying to their own shareholders. They're used to lying to their own members of their own organizations. If they've made deals to finance their companies so that they could jump out and get 6 or 8 stores right away, they made horrible financing deals, and now the devil is due. And that means they have to achieve a certain profit margin that's not normally achievable. So this is their desperate way of trying to remain solvent in a situation they created where they won't be able to remain solvent. And Jim, you're up next.
One more with a perishable product. I got to add, okay, something you've got to handle, a perishable product. It's not like you're dealing like with a party store stuff that doesn't go bad. This is another thing I don't understand.
They've proved it's not perishable. They're selling shit.
Yeah.
Well, we got Oregon has a 3-year supply. Canada has like a 6-year supply of cannabis already stocked up right now. And we know as consumers, every day after it's harvested, it degrades a little bit more, especially if it's not cured properly. Jim Salame, thank you.
What's up? Gosh, this is obviously a pretty emotional topic. There's so much to unwrap with it. The first thing I think about when I think about it is how long have we had this law and what problems have we had? We haven't had any problems in over a decade, right?
RSO guys occasionally burning down.
Other than police enforcement issues.
We've been illicit for 100 years. We haven't had any problems other than law enforcement.
Yeah. And then the second part of that
about the market.
Yeah, let's get Jim a moment.
It's a control thing too, and I feel like it's just they're totally squeezing it, and eventually they're going to get rid of the caregiver system. And what Sunshine Daisy was just pointing out is that there are things that caregivers can give and provide her and her family that dispensaries cannot. And that's a big issue because there are things that people can make that are for certain specific needs. I mean, Ida can attest to this as well. And people need that special care. And giant dispensaries, giant whatever, they're not going to provide that for people. And then finally, it's a plant, and I can brew as much booze as I want in my home. Right?
There's some limit, actually.
There are limits.
Wow.
There are limits.
Of course.
Now you're going to give me the full camera when I say that. But the fact that I can grow tomatoes, for example, as many as I want, I think that's a big part of this. And it's a plant, and it doesn't harm people. It hasn't harmed people for thousands of years. So that's the part I still think. There's a certain faction of people that can't wrap their minds around certain facts of science and issues in this world, and I really wish that they would. They would get out of the echo chambers of whatever's providing them their direction, because it's misleading. It's misleading the public.
Now, I know we have guests coming on. I want to get to Colin real quick, but let me just say that the retail model is a wonderful thing, and it's only part of the entire full spectrum of care that's required in order to take care of patients. In any retail environment, there's a lag time between what you say you want and what they're able to deliver. And oftentimes in retail, you can ask for a specialty item and they simply can't get it if it's not available. But if you go to a caregiver and you say, I need this specific item, and you have a caregiver who loves you, that caregiver will hunt that shit down.
Yes.
They will find a way to create it. They'll find a master at that, and they will learn that craft in order to assist you with your medicine. And that's a true statement all of us here can attest to, because we've seen it with our own eyes. Now, that means caregivers and retail are two different pieces of the same puzzle that we need in Michigan in order to fully service our patients. And I want to go to Colin now, because I know we have guests coming on and time is running short.
Yeah, so make it snappy, Colin.
No, take your time, Colin.
There's an ice cream truck coming by my street. I can hear it. So, but I don't know what we're talking about. The caregiver versus those big companies. So I just first off, I just want to say to everyone, I'm sorry for ever selling you a Wana gummy or a North Taffy. It's all we had at that time. They changed the rules back then, and I don't really, support them anymore. And I mean, I haven't gone to a dispensary in a while to buy edibles. And I just know the flower that they had that I've seen is not very good, and it's very expensive. So I just try and steer clear of those brands. And I don't know. I think it's just I said a couple weeks ago when we voted in 2018 to legalize cannabis. There was a lot more focus for most people, I think, for the arrestment aspect of the law, and I think it just kind of goes back into that, like, okay, now you're trying to criminalize these people. Now you're trying to go back into these people's houses and wherever. And, I know when I worked at Bloom, there was also just not a lot of RSO that was around, and it was expensive. And I just know through the caregiver system, a lot of people, have really big hearts and can, donate medicine to patients across the state. And I think that that has like made Michigan at least like a cannabis refugee state, and it brings a lot of growers from across the country to our state. And I think that by changing that law, it would be undoing a lot of that progress that we've made here in Michigan.
Yeah, fuck that.
Well, I agree. Let's just take a couple of housekeeping things here. Christiana says nothing's tailored for individual patients in retail environments. It's true. When you're mass producing things, it's almost impossible to stop and take an individual order. No question. Joe Sullivan, of course, good friend. Joe says caregivers should be allowed farmers markets. A couple of them still exist, and many of them existed over the years in Michigan, and they were very successful. And Berg says, Mr. Hash Bash, love that shirt.
Hey, I represent.
Yes. All right. So, Jamie, we have guests coming on. Is it true?
We do, and we already have Russ Chambers joining us here right now.
How's it going?
Hey, Russ, how you doing? So, Russ, obviously, of a botanical company, Franklin Fields, soon to be a processing company, many other companies, but been participating in this industry in various ways for a while. And part of what we're talking about are like who actually is doing this and who are industry participants, that have different approaches or, more concerned about, their own operation and presence in the commercial market. And we did a on-site broadcast at a botanical company or, Franklin Fields area a while ago. And we owe another one because the sound was really horrible, and we'll be able to come back and do that better. But we talked briefly for a moment though with Russ, and we described about the research, putting together team people who know the various components of things that are necessary to do this properly. And I was wondering, Russ, when you see these guys that are looking to focus a lot of time and energy on restricting what caregivers can currently do, does that reflect a group of people that have a great understanding of what's going on in this new commercial world?
Not at all. Two things. The caregiver market's a small market. I was a caregiver for many years, and me transitioning into the commercial market, I absolutely understand that the caregiver market was always going to be there. That's not what we're focused on. The relationship between grower and patient is very personal. And then the other thing too is I think most of these people were caregivers before they moved into the commercial market. So I really don't understand why they think they're competing with the caregiver market. It's kind of sad.
My question is, why do they lie about it? Why do they say it's got untested products that are dangerous?
If you don't have facts, you have to lie in order to justify your position.
And again, on that same page of language, they include other businesses, the micro business, as something they attack also. So that's a bullshit.
We've used some anachronisms to discuss. Well, we use some anachronisms to describe some industry trade groups here, and I don't want to get two different trade groups confused. Ida, would you please explain the difference between the Michigan Cannabis Industry Association and the Michigan Cannabis Manufacturers Association? Because one of them seems to really support caregivers, and one of them really seems to not.
So the Michigan Cannabis Industry Association supports caregivers, and all of our board members were actually caregivers at one point. So we support caregivers. We support the patients, and caregivers are, customers of our dispensaries.
How many members do you have, Ida?
Over 300.
And how many members of the Michigan Cannabis Manufacturers Association have?
13.
They claim.
So
they
Yeah,
claim.
we don't know for sure.
And then 300, right? So when we look at who should be driving the engine of discussion regarding industry, It should be the Michigan Cannabis Industry Association, not this very small group of well-connected, the Fords and
Highly
Chrysler of the
funded.
cannabis industry.
Right.
Bam.
Yep. Now, Russ, you're a member of one of those groups too, right?
Yes, the MICIA for
Yes.
many years
So-
now. Many years.
And when you talk about the MICIA, that's a company or an organization you think accurately reflects your viewpoint, right?
100%.
Yeah.
That's why they have 300 members.
I mean, we work on clemency, patients' rights, expungement issues. I mean, we want to protect the rules, that come out. That's our focus.
And in fact, when legislators have potential rules that they'd like to propose to the legislature, don't they oftentimes come to the MICIA offices to say, hey, can we get your support for this before we actually have it introduced? Because if you don't support this, we don't want to get behind that bill. Isn't that true?
We do take meetings with them, yes.
Yeah. And you do a lot of consulting with lawmakers, and it's almost as if you are the yin to the MCMA's yang, right?
Maybe.
Okay. Russ, I know we've got you just for a short time. I don't want to ignore you, but I wanted to establish a difference between the different trade associations. When you watch this and you see, Russ, companies like Green Peak or Flourish maybe giving the industry a bad name, doesn't it all sometimes feel like they're accidentally giving you a bad name as well?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've already been lumped in with these groups and had to explain myself that, hey, we have nothing to do with these people. I mean, these people made and they are making bad business decisions. And I think they're in panic mode right now. They don't really know what else to do.
Russ, they took their website offline. What does that tell you?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you're not transparent, that says a lot about you and your company.
And we talked about 13 members, but a recent news report revealed that only 6 of those 13 are willing to have their names publicly known as members of the MCMA. What does that tell you, Russ Chambers?
It tells me that they're scared. I think that, this boycott is very important. I think the information needs to be out there for the consumers and the caregivers. Listen, if we do have caregiver patients come in and we give them a discount, and they come in because they are in between runs with their caregiver. And we try to give a medical discount and encourage customers to use us when they need us. But the last thing we do is try to get them as a customer and them not use their caregiver, So, I mean, I can't even believe we're having this conversation right now.
Well,
we all came from being caregivers, or most of us did. And we knew when we went to the commercial market that the caregiver market was going to be there and it's not going to go anywhere.
yeah, but you didn't sell investors on the fact that your master grower, who'd been growing for the last 5 years, knows that his 12 plants produce this much. So now the 1,200 is going to produce this much. So now you sold your investors on those numbers. And now a year later, you've never hit any of those numbers. And your investors are going nuts. That's not you, and that's not people like you.
That's what really does this.
I think some of these big groups are having a hard time passing microbial testing, and maybe they don't think it's fair that they have to pass whatever it may be. But they should have known that and understood that going into the commercial market. I mean, as my last year as being a caregiver, it was really important for us to adopt the system we're going to use on a larger scale when we win the commercial market, but to make sure we were going to pass microbial testing. And so we did a lot of testing as caregivers. So when we transitioned into the commercial market, that we had an understanding of what this testing was going to be and what it was going to look like.
Ida, your members are not really struggling, are they? Your members are doing pretty good, right?
Our members are doing good, except for, with what's going on in the association, just because, people are getting mixed up. But something that Russ just said, cannabis, I just lost my train of thought.
I did that to you. I'm bad.
Sorry, but you're confirming Russ's sentiments here.
Yeah, I was going to say something about so when we were getting Bella's medicine, I mean, it was being tested for safety issues because she was a pediatric patient. So anyone who has cancer or needs to use this as a medicine, the caregivers are already on themselves testing this medicine. It shouldn't be made, to force them to do anything that they're already doing. So yeah,
I think
Remind
the majority of the caregivers would pass testing regardless.
and they would because they're already making the medicine. Yeah, and Rick, what you say, they go out and they research it, and yeah, they care about it, and they want to provide that quality of care.
It's
Or
only
there
the
was a
greed
time
that
when-
gets in the way of that.
The only industry we had in Michigan, regulated industry, was caregivers. And that time after the MMFLA passed, but before the MRTMA kicked in, we had hundreds of distribution centers across the state, or 100 maybe, all supplied by caregiver cannabis and all tested and passed. So the concept that caregiver cannabis is somehow dirty, unclean, can't pass testing, we've already disproven that in our own lifetimes, in our own personal experience the last couple of years. So when the MCMA says things like that or implies things like that, it's already a huge red flag to us because we know that it's not accurate.
Well, and this is an alternative medicine. We should not limit any modality to get to alternative medicine, period.
On the recreational side, the microbial has to be under 100,000 parts per million. And you get up to 50 or 60, you're going to visibly be able to see the mold on the flower. So, as a caregiver, if I gave my patients product that had visible mold on it, they're going to be like, Russ, what's going on here? I don't want this.
Yeah. I mean, when we were hand trimming things, it was very easy for the person who gave a shit, who was actually doing that and got paid to do it, to find that out immediately upon visual inspection. When it's being industrially trimmed through a machine, I don't know if there's that level, and I don't know because I've not been there when that happens, but I just don't know if there's that level of attention being able to be paid. So.
Well, and with the remediation that's going on too, I'm kind of disagree with that. I'm not going to mention the store, but we got into a couple different stores, and they said, Russ, do you know how hard it is? Thank God we've got your flower now, because we've had flower in here that was remediated and it has visible mold on it. And to explain to a consumer or a patient, oh yeah, you can see the mold, don't worry, it's been remediated. I mean, come on, it's a joke.
Yeah.
Well, that's a quality control issue. I mean, the reality is that no company should be putting a visibly moldy product out, remediated or not. And nobody, that did not come from the black market. That would have never happened.
That's the commercial market.
Correct.
Yeah, black market never would have tolerated that.
We wouldn't have tolerated that. I mean, we offer refunds in the black market.
Now, we have just a ton of experience here in this call with both regulated and unregulated retail situations. Jamie Lowell with Third Coast, I of course have years with Big Daddies. Russ is with Boco. Jim Salame, though, Ohm of Medicine. I mean, Jim, you ran a wonderful location in Ann Arbor at Ohm. It was the top in the state. It was the coolest vibe. It was some of the best cannabis. Can you imagine ever in your time selling something that you had visible mold on it and then trying to explain it away by saying, well, it's dead. So
we tested more when people weren't testing, especially for patients that really needed it and that had compromised immune systems. And we gave away RSO. I mean, we had caregivers that gave away RSO for our patients that were in need, to the point that, maybe they were dealing with cancer, or maybe they had other issues that it provided. So we try to provide that. It's, I don't know. It's the way someone used a word earlier about tailoring things, and the tailor-made options that we could provide for people were above anything else you can find in a dispensary today. And it's even getting less diverse as far as selection is concerned. I'm glad that CBD is finally starting to come out, and you're seeing more CBD products in the dispensaries. But there are other things. There are suppositories. I mean, there are other types of ratios and tinctures out there that can be made, because the ratios are really important. I mean, we were getting into that as far as 2-to-1s and 1-to-1s and how different it is, and if you added CBNs in there, and there's so many things that you can try in the realm for individual patient care. When it comes to being a caregiver, which is what we're talking about.
Now, Russ, when you first opened BOCO, you had a certain selection of products available to you now. You're a couple years in. How's that selection improved? And have you noticed certain brands that really stand out as somebody that you're always proud to carry?
Yes, I do. So even though that we have our grow up and running, we still use Tom Bella at Real Leaf Solutions and Drew Driver at Driven Grow. They consistently have great product coming out, and it's consistent.
Right. And as far as product selection goes now, I mean, so much different now than when you first started, correct?
It's overwhelming right now. I'd have to look into what edible lines and vape lines that we are currently using right now. It's been a minute since I've been part of the purchasing department.
No, but the thought is that there's a lot more options available to you now than there were previously.
Oh, by far. And so when we first opened Tawas, the commercial market per pound or edible, whatever, was $35 to $4,000 a pound. And we made a conscious decision that we weren't going to pass a majority of that cost onto our consumer. So for the first 6 to 8 months, we stayed the black, but barely. So now there's a lot of options out there, quality and expensive stuff, and we are still, just this year getting our profit margins up. But for the first year, I didn't really want to sell somebody a $20 gram, flower.
Yeah. Well, what we're seeing with the product availability, though, is that in California and some Western states, there's something called shelf premiums that are being charged. They have a lot of different names, but essentially, when the competition becomes so great that people are competing to get on your shelves, other retailers in other states have decided to charge rent on that particular shelf space to that manufacturer. It's a pretty odious practice. I can't even imagine why people would want to continue to work with you if you're double dipping them like that. But Russ, can you see some places in Michigan maybe going to something like that to help them pare down the offerings they have available?
I could see the big players that have 10 plus stores doing something like that. My motto in business is I like to do business with people I like and friends. So that's something that I wouldn't be interested in doing.
You just opened a new location, didn't you, at BOCO?
Well, we got the Lansing store opened last November, and we're weeks away from opening our Kalkaska store. And then after that store gets open, probably a month to 5 weeks behind that for our social use lounge that'll be connected to that store. So we got some really exciting things coming up.
But that'll be this summer, though. I mean, you're talking about 5 weeks. That's not that far away.
No. And our labs, we're hoping to get our lab open by July. We got some pretty cool products, infused beverages and affordable gummies, cartridges, and even edibles for sleep. That's what I use a lot of the edibles for, sleeping, but I hate eating a gummy covered in sugar right before I go to bed. So we're do some vegan stuff too.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, that's exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that's, again, you're seeing some products that are going to take advantage of some niche markets. When all the main product lines are satisfied and they're starting to get fat, that's when niche markets start to work out, whether it's, diabetic, whether it's vegan, no gluten. There are all different types of things. One of the things that we're hampered by in Michigan is having a requirement for shelf-stable edibles. And that basically means that you can't have anything that requires refrigeration. But there's a lot of product lines that would be available if refrigeration or freezers were available. Russ, if that were to change, if those product lines were to become available, would you happily snap those things up and sell them to your customers?
No, absolutely. I would love to do some sort of frozen slushy or popsicle stick,
Ice cream.
Especially in the summer months, ice cream. Good food. Infused food. My brother's a chef, so I think we could come up with some pretty creative stuff.
Yeah. Hey, so Russ, I know that you only had like a little bit of time with us, and you've been on for a while, and I really appreciate it. You mentioned Tom Beller. I did talk to him earlier and asked him to come on. He couldn't make it today, but he echoed a lot of the stuff that you said, and he also said his caregiver mentality has stuck with him through scaling up into the commercial system, and he really views it as trying to get good medicine out to people through this system now instead of through the one that he used to work in, and it certainly in no way would support doing anything to hurt the caregiver system.
No, and affordable. We don't. Tom and Drew, they never gouge when they could have gouged stores. They wanted to build long-term relationships.
Hey, you brought up East Talis, right? That was very crucial for us earlier. Yeah.
There's some points that we were paying $3,500 a pound, and I told those people, fine, I'm going to do this so I have supply, but we'll never have a long-term relationship.
As a retail manager for many years, I can tell you long-term relationships are important, not just with your corporate partners, but also with your purchasing partners, and establishing a one-on-one dialogue between the person at the counter and the consumer coming in is crucial. Are you really working hard to retain staff and make sure that the best people are forward-facing in your organization, Ross?
Yes, we are. It can be difficult sometimes. I mean, we have 80 employees right now, but just training them, educating them. And my phone's always available too, because if there is a hiccup with a relationship, that person picks the phone up and calls me.
Yeah.
Hey, Russ, I want to read the position of the MICIA from Executive Director Robin Schneider, and then we'll give you any last words you'd like to leave us with, and we'll continue this conversation. And really appreciate you coming on to help us demonstrate, that there are different points of view in the industry itself, and that there's a specific problem here that we're talking about. So the statement from the Executive Director Robin Schneider of the MICIA: our members know firsthand that our industry was built on the backs of caregivers, and that patients deserve options, including homegrown. It is for this reason that our board of directors unanimously passed a resolution stating that the MICIA will not support any legislative effort that is harmful to patients or their caregivers. And I think a lot of people agreed with that. In fact, I saw that passed around from the article as the lead on top in a lot of social media postings. So
I couldn't say it any better. I mean, geez, I was a caregiver. I love being a caregiver. I loved helping patients. They just moved over to the commercial market,
And if they allowed you, you'd probably still be a caregiver.
No, absolutely.
And that's something I find interesting, that these people were all forced to give up their caregiver licenses, but had they not been, they probably still would all be caregivers.
All part of the same ultimate strategy that we've been talking about. Those things got in for that reason.
Yeah, Rick was talking about that there was a decline in caregivers in Michigan, and it was mostly because there was myself and two other people that are my head growers right now, and we were all caregivers together, and we had to give up our caregiver's license to enter the commercial market.
You probably know more former caregivers than current caregivers.
I'd say about 50-50 now.
Okay.
But that's a fair assumption, though, Adam. Actually, and I'm a former caregiver. I was a caregiver for 3 years, registered with the state, and I know Jamie was too, and Deb currently is. So we're all. When we're talking about this is a life we lead. This is a path we walk. It's not some hypothetical we're discussing. These are real world things that actually affect the way that we operate and interact with our particular fellows. I know we've got Daryl Stavros here too. Russ, do you have a few more minutes to hang out, or do you need to run?
I've got a couple more minutes.
Awesome. Okay, good. Yep.
Now, you know Daryl, don't you?
Yes.
For sure. How's it going?
Good. How are you? It's been a while.
Good to see you.
Just to give Daryl a bit of an introduction, Daryl currently works with Oz Cannabis in Ypsilanti, but before he was with Oz, he was one of the founders of the very first locally recognized dispensary in the state, Third Coast Compassion, along with Jamie Lowell and another gentleman, so Anthony Freed. Long history, back all the way to 2009, yes. Staying in the industry. And Daryl, you were uninterrupted, completely in this industry the entire time, and still are. What a change you may have witnessed. I mean, my gosh.
Well, I think a lot of that had to do with, day one, we went straight to the city, and kind of, me and Jamie, and I think Anthony was in that meeting, but definitely Jamie and I were, and we met with the zoning commissioner of the city, and we just started doing things kind of right out in the open with them and asked them first. And they said, yeah, it looks like I don't see why you couldn't do this, is what they told us. So that's it. If you go that way, you can always, no one's going to try to shut you down. The city was with us. the police asked
The
for
county prosecutor did not make a priority, which is
correct.
makes a big difference. Yeah.
They're not going to fight with the city.
Yeah, so, exactly. So, and we give so many tours throughout the whole state where they would come down to Third Coast, police department, locals, and small municipalities would come through, and we were always very professional. It's funny because we all started when we started Third Coast, we were all suit and tie. So you know, even Jamie, I think, had a suit and tie at one point. But, yeah,
That's awesome.
That's hilarious.
yeah. Funny, Harry from People's Choice now, but he was one of our first bud tenders. He wore a suit those first few days too.
I am surprised to hear that.
Yeah.
It's not court, and he was in a suit. Wow.
And Harry was with People Choice up to the point when it was still good and respectable.
Right.
That's
and then
true.
he left, and then that ceased, just for clarity.
Yeah, there you go, Jamie.
And of course, you guys set the standard too with cannabis-themed events. The Eagle Crest Resort right there in Ypsilanti. That was 2010. You started right off by sort of redefining where the boundaries were in the state of Michigan and in Ann Arbor, Ypsilanti specifically.
Yeah, that was one of the first actual cannabis cups, kind of. We called it a caregiver cup because that's what we were. We were all caregivers. We did it as a private club. And at that time, they allowed us to do a vapor tent. It was a 5,000 square foot tent. I had to bring vaporizers to the police chief and fire marshal, and I had to show them how these devices worked. These were all meetings leading up to these because they wanted to see were there any issues. They definitely didn't want us to do open smoke in that, so that's why we.
Now we had noticed there were some like weddings and stuff, and they did kind of just let them get away with smoking. But because of all the attention on this, the fire marshal and everybody said you can't do that.
Yeah.
But they said vaping was okay, and like somebody had to go down to Ohio and buy like 40 or 50 vapes or something like that.
That's a great part of the story that you could only vape, you couldn't smoke, but you didn't want people to have to bring their own vaporizers because it was such a new technology. So you scoured the state, and even had to go to Ohio so you could provide for your
We had
patients,
40,
right?
40 vaporizers, and these were the old ones with the whip.
Yeah.
They have alcohol swabs everywhere. And the funniest part about the whole situation was, you know, Jamie and I were so busy to getting the event put on and doing everything in the ballroom and all that stuff that the fire marshal actually showed up and was hanging out in the vape tent. And people were asking, how do you use this thing? He was there showing people because he saw the demonstrations I gave him. He's in uniform showing them how these devices work.
I wish there's a photo of that. That would be classic. No, so let's fast forward now. I mean, we talked about some of the history, but fast forward to right now, Daryl. Some of the things that we did then, in the interim, I mean, we did the extravaganza with Big Daddies. We rented out the Imlay City Fairgrounds in Lapeer County, so we were pushing the boundaries in 2010 and 2011 also too. And then for a period of time, all that stuff was brought to a screeching halt. They didn't want to do any of it. Then the High Times Cannabis Cups came back and they started to redo events. Now we're seeing some things that we used to be able to get away with licensed and regulated in ways we never imagined possible. What do you think about some of those things?
I still know there's no full enforcement on a lot of issues, so a lot of these things will continue on for a while, almost how they were. But eventually, I'm sure they're trying to get a stranglehold on it. I've seen some good licensed events in California. There's ways to do it properly. It's just very difficult. They've made it difficult to do events for sure.
One of the difficult things is insurance. I know that you've been doing some different things. You've talked to some different people. Daryl, insurance for cannabis events, what's your insight into that?
I mean, we even had that at our 2010 event. For that one at Hillcrest, we had insurance. It was an insurance rider that we had to pay for a 2-day event. It wasn't like too outrageous, but it was new to them. So it was one of those, we had to have an ambulance that was on staff.
Right. Some of that stuff was expensive, man. Some of that extra add-on shit last
When you
minute.
say expensive, I mean, it was $5,000 for the 2 days. I mean, that's even though it's only a 2-day insurance, it's when you look at that many people coming, $5,000 is not like astronomical.
Not that, but there was like a list of things that were like add-on.
Very expensive though.
You had to have medical personnel on staff. You had to have a certain number of security personnel on staff. You had to have, plans. I know. I remember when we
had music downtown for people, and there was a bus or revolving transportation for anybody. We took people who were patients right to the dispensary on a regular basis, and then later at night downtown to where we had bands in venues set up and stuff. That was
the good old days. Like insurance companies are getting kind of smart thing. They're jumping on the bandwagon just like anyone else.
So Daryl, you talked about there's ways that they can do things and still make it work. Now we've got cannabis companies similar to Oz that are deciding they want to come against caregivers, that they want to crack down on somebody that's not really proven to be a problem. That does give your industry a bad name. Russ was saying it, he's oftentimes had to explain to people he's not part of that group. Is that a conversation you have to have with people?
Yeah, for sure. And Oz is in the same situation. I mean, they're local guys too. They were all caregivers, used to build caregiver grows for people too. And what I tell people, and what these big guys need to really look at, caregivers are not competition. There's plenty of people. I mean, it's stupid that they even think that. It's not even a huge number if you really look at it as a whole. What they need to look at is maybe petitioning the legislation to ease the testing requirement and put things more on a level playing ground. Those are things they should be looking at, because some of these testing requirements, they don't have that in organic growing of tomatoes and herbs and turmeric and things like that. You know, I know people in California that have, you know, they went through all the testing stuff there for a lot of their capsules that they've made and kept failing, finally broke the whole capsule down. All their cannabis stuff that was in it was passing with flying colors. It was organic turmeric that they bought from Whole Foods that was failing. So, I mean, if there's not stringent requirements on everyone else and things that we're putting in our edibles, then why is there that stringent of requirements on everything else that we do? So, I mean, that would be more of an even playing ground that they should argue with, if anything. I would never argue. That means they're not doing their job.
Right. Move forward, not backwards. Remove
why
restrictions.
why don't we concentrate on fair banking?
Right.
I mean, Jesus.
Yeah, there's definitely other things they need to complain about. Because if you're complaining about caregivers taking your business, that means you're not doing your job well.
Nope.
Yeah.
Explain about that, Daryl. Talk a little bit more about that. There's plenty of action out there for people if they structure their corporate entity correctly. They can deal with this without hurting caregivers. Isn't that true?
100%. I mean, you know, the fact is, like, I'll go back to testing. There are a lot of commercial grows that are failing a lot of tests, and they're working through it and trying to work out the much. One of the things I do, a company called Team Ag Solutions, so we're a consulting group. So we've been going around to a lot of these licensed facilities and changing some of the practices that they're doing so they can pass some of these stringent tests. So, I mean, once that happens, I mean, there's plenty of flower out there. Oz has no problem finding flower from the licensed systems. So, I mean, they have one of the biggest inventories probably in the state. So that's why we do so well at the one Ypsilanti shop, at least. Because, you know, people complain that they can't find adequate medicine. It's out there. They just don't know where to look. Everybody's being lazy, and they're looking at the Leaf Link or something. And hey, I can't find it in Leaf Link. Well, you know, the old school days with caregivers, we didn't have Leaf Link. We had to go find people. And that's what you need to do. You know, there's a list of all the farms in the commercial thing. You could literally have a sales guy, go out there, introduce yourself, say, hey, we're buying flour, we're buying extracts. Here, I come across farms that have a bunch of material and they don't know where to get rid of it. So, I mean, they're out there. People are just being lazy, and they need to actually do their job.
Ida.
Yes.
You wanted to say something you mentioned?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. It's closing time. The office is closing. I was just waving bye to everybody.
Aww. Well, but let's talk about that, though. MICIA, you're full of a whole bunch of people that do cultivation and retail. If there was ever an organization that was going to hear about problems in the industry, it's one that has 350 members. Are you really hearing from your members that it's so difficult to survive out there that they have to predate on the sick and innocent in order to survive?
No, caregivers are not even on the radar. So we have more important issues to work on.
This was never discussed.
Ida, could you imagine if I called you and I said, you got to do something about these caregivers? I mean, it's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous.
Yeah, let me use this as an opportunity to add on to that. We were going to talk, we don't have to get too in-depthly into it, into some of the implications if some of this language were to actually be changed and the caregivers were to have to be in metric and to have their medicine consistently tested. What type of log jam, what type of strain on existing resources would having to go to thousands of different houses potentially throughout
Well,
the state have.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
The reality
And
is
the
that with
price of
only
meds-
15 testing centers and 30,000 caregivers, if you were to require caregivers to test their cannabis, remember each caregiver garden usually has between 2 and 12 different strains based on how wild that caregiver feels like being that particular harvest, right? But each one of those strains requires different testing. And that would absolutely swamp an industry where it's already pretty strained as it is. Testing facilities don't have a lot of extra capacity to just absorb 2,000 caregivers as customers. In addition to that, the distribution of testing facilities is really limited in Michigan. The most northern one is in Traverse City. There's not even one in the entire Upper Peninsula. So that makes that testing of caregiver cannabis non-functional. And let's also talk about making caregivers monitor their gardens through the metric system, similar to the way that the commercial market does right now. I know retailers and commercial guys that try to call the marijuana regulatory agency for guidance and for assistance and have a hard time getting through. Imagine how tough it would be getting through and getting things resolved if the MRA had 30,000 caregivers that they had to add into the metric system, that they had to advise on how to properly tag their plants, and that when the metric system goes down, imagine how much more difficult it would be to restore service to those retailers, because there'd just be so many more users. There can't be more than 1,500 users in metric, 2,000 users total. And you want to put 15 times that on the system all at once, like Sabrina the Teenage Witch, right? Now, that's just not going to work. So when we mentioned at the beginning of the show how some of these concepts didn't seem like they'd been thought all the way through, there's a real detriment to the existing regulated system by adopting some of these. And the people in the NCMA would be the ones most negatively affected by this. That's why it's almost laughable that they've put forth this proposal or this series of proposals. And the fact that they actually would get legislators to support them is even more.
I mean, if they got that push through, then be fair, let the caregivers sell to the commercial dispensaries.
They'll never.
If they have to, I know that, but I mean.
Yeah, for me, that's not even an option. I mean, patients use everything I grow. It's not even an option. I'm looking to sell into the dispensaries.
No, but some would like to, and in fact, during the emergency rules, that was going on regularly.
Maybe, I don't know.
I
and it worked out. And it goes on in Oklahoma. Go ahead, Adam.
Why you couldn't enter the licensed market? It should be about a tested product if that's what they're going to require. If they require testing, and I can pass testing, I should be able to be in that market. It should.
Well, that's what it is in Oklahoma. It's a small price for a license to participate, but people grow it on their own property and then bring it to market.
Yeah.
Well, I think these people would back off if that was on the table too. That would scare them even more.
Well, that's the point. If we're going to open up the act, that's the kind of stuff we have to look at. Again,
that's
looking
just open up the act. I mean,
And there's a lot of things to fix. There have been a lot of dysfunctional and completely obstructionist interpretations that have yet to be addressed. That have been effectuated by Bill Schuette and others. And if we're going to open up the act again, that's where I'd rather spend some time.
Yeah, there's no reason not to co-locate caregiver grows. You shouldn't have to have grows segregated if they're different patients and the same caregiver operates that. You should be able to have people come in your grow to be able to assist you. It shouldn't be exclusively just one particular person. And
the idea of you can only
2.5 ounces as a amount you can carry as a caregiver. There's so many different things we could do.
And to delivery.
So it's been misinterpreted that your 15 ounces is the max you can have even at your house. And of course, you're growing 72 plants.
Right.
You're going to have more than 15 ounces likely.
You're out of.
And so that was designed for when you're out and about. Not
and also
for what's at your house.
The cost of all the stuff. The cost of testing and the cost of moving this product around and blah blah blah. It's going to increase the meds.
Mm-hmm.
This is part of the reason that we're so successful with
it's an unnecessary burden.
System. Everything is the whole thing is.
Every time the average price of cannabis goes up, the number of people participating goes down.
Guess how many people they pointed to as victims of not having these safeguards in place?
No victims.
Zero.
None.
There's no issue.
Right.
It's never
so it's obvious. And again, it's obvious what
I argue
for
them to look at looking at the testing. Get that more if the commercial group can get closer to the same level as the caregivers, at least get the testing a little more less. I mean, that's the way I look at things. But Then
You
they're not
guys-
gonna argue about things.
Do you guys think it's inevitable that they're going to open it up and change some things in there? Like that is going to happen, and what kind of corporations can we find that, you know, if it comes down to these bargaining chips of like, you know, you want that, well then we want this, and how would that work out? And that's because that's something that I can see definitely
That's a
happen.
concern, man, especially when you have good things. There are good things out there. The pediatric bill would require, which was to allow pediatric patients to use cannabis on school grounds and grade schools. It requires opening up the MMA in part, along with some educational codes and stuff like that. And
Director Brisbow's hot on. I'm sorry, Director Brisbow's hot on combining the medical and the adult use licensing programs.
Still being discussed.
We barely stopped him from introducing a bill last year to do the same. We needed it to have more modifications. Clearly, it's going through modifications right now.
The Delta 8 bill would open up the MRTMA and possibly the MMMA, according to like the information that's being circulated, to change definitions of hemp and marijuana.
So it's inevitable. It's going to happen.
Well, that's not a foregone conclusion, you know.
Okay.
I think it is. I think what Director Brisbow wants, Director Brisbow gets. He wants these two things combined. Ida, you see you're more close to this than any of us. Do you think it's kind of inevitable that they're going to try and combine these two programs this year?
He's trying, yeah.
But the devil's in the details. He can try. If it's shitty, you know, I mean, that's going to be an issue. So
Right.
I think what we're agreeing on is that there will be a proposal made. We're not agreeing that it'll be successful, but I think we're agreeing that they will make a proposal to join those two, and that would require opening up both of our voter-directed initiatives.
just a little active sometimes when we start talking about this stuff. So
Well,
It's
yeah.
good.
Well,
We'll
it's
do
just a
so.
matter of-
Yeah.
The reason why I bring it up is a matter of being prepared for, like, you know, the better changes that need to exist, you know, for outdoor growing, for example, and whatnot. So.
Well, this is why having a full dialogue is important, because not only are we talking about things we don't like, we're also talking about things that we do like. And we know that Jazz Cabbage Cafe is a very popular show. Nationally, we've won awards. We're recognized here in the state. So there are lawmakers that pay attention to what we say. And if we bring up ideas that sound like they are plausible, that they are workable, and there may be good workarounds, they may find their way into legislation if there's champions out there that do that. So this is the process by which we self-regulate our industry. Okay, it's bad. People have a bad idea, they throw it out there. All of us rise up with our pitchforks and say, "Bad idea," and then they push a little harder on their bad idea, and we rise up even further. And that's when they finally back down and realize they can't get away with what they tried to do. That's us self-regulating the industry, and that's a positive thing. So yay to all the revolutionaries out there that are pitchforking and burning, torching, heading towards Frankenstein's castle to get this guy's ass kicked.
hey, I know that at this point Russ does have to get back to work, and just want to, before you have to do that, just give you a second to maybe offer some last words.
Thanks for fighting a good fight. Thanks for having me. And I've got to take my daughter to soccer practice. So
Cool.
I'm going to run, but thanks everybody. I appreciate everything. Keep it
Sucker
up.
bad.
Yeah.
See you, man.
Right?
Thank you.
Take care, guys.
So Daryl, you have a son that's very, very successful in sports too. I just saw. Congratulations to you and he.
I think anytime I don't have to pay for college, that's a good thing.
And is that he's getting a
What's
full
the news?
scholarship
What's the
for
news?
soccer?
Yeah, well, he's at a school where they can't give it for athletics, so they figure a way to do it for academics. But they're having him play soccer, and he's a track guy, so it's great. I'll have to brag real quick, but he's a big pole vaulter, so he got it for pole vaulting. He's jumping about 14.6, which is pretty high. But he broke his hand in the second to last meet on a pole vault. The place they were at had a faulty hole that he stuck in, and he slipped, shattered his hand and his elbow. So what does this kid do the next meet? He's in a full cast. They left his elbow alone, but just kind of in a sling. But he decides to do a long jump and takes first place ever. And then second meet after that, he qualified for states. So now he's going to states as a long jump.
Well, I'm a former pole vaulter myself. I pole vaulted in high school, and I'll tell you, 14 feet plus, that's a big pole.
Yeah.
I did too, Rick. I didn't get very high. So
Yeah, that's bigger than I can
I get
claim.
higher
credit.
in other ways now.
I mean, the real pole vaulting, right? I mean, like track and field got a letter for it, not the kind of pole vaulting that, you might be thinking I was talking about.
Wow.
Yeah, Flint Central, baby. Everything went down there. Come on. So, Daryl, again, Ypsilanti and Ann Arbor has been a real bastion of cannabis freedom, not only in Michigan but in the United States of America. And you've assisted in the production or supported Hash Bash, Mr. Hash Bash's Hash Bash Cup programs that he's done, the various ones over the years. How important is it to you to stay active and to support the things that our people come to?
Well, I love to stay active as much as I can, but there's new groups coming, and I have no problem with the new and younger people coming in, and I'm there for support, and let these new people kind of come in and do the thing, as long as, we don't forget about the guys that have been doing this for a long time, like Adam Brook, like, Rick Tyler, you guys, all of you. They need to not forget about who's brought this to that level. And these are good events that have been going on, and I hope they continue to go on as long as they can. And I'm always there to support as much as I can. But I even though I'm not as old as most people probably think I am, I feel like I'm getting older. So for me, it's time to pass the baton. I told everybody I'm giving a 3-year run right now, even with the license market and everything. But I'm here to help support other people as much as I can. Their growth now. My growth's happened. We've done what we can. And, I want to see other people succeed now. That's why I created the consulting company that we have now called Team Ag Solutions. So we're here to help.
Say the name of it again.
Yeah, it's Team Ag Solutions.
Okay.
It's a group mainly of 3 of us. My main cultivation guy, Brandon Show. If you see on Instagram, he's Dr. Kenobi. He controlled 300,000 square feet of canopy in outside of Santa Barbara, California for years. Adam, my other partner, he was number 2 employee at Glass House. He basically built that whole facility, which just sold for $500 million in California. So, these guys know what they're doing. And we're helping some of these big farms now kind of adjust to growing at scale and how to build out scale. So that's kind of what we're focusing on now. We're building a new facility on the West Coast right now that I have to be there Thursday for final approval with the township, but we'll have a 10,000 plant grow there that we're controlling for another group, but all the licensing is in my name of that. But these are projects that we're working on, and we're, like I said, I'm going to give it a 3-year run, and then I'll hand it off. So that's kind of my goal right now.
3 years after 13. So, I mean, it's quite a stretch. Man.
Yeah, just so you put it in perspective, when Jamie and I started Third Coast, I said 5 years.
Yeah, when I started Big Daddy's, I was probably 30 pounds ago. Let me just say, one of the things that you just talked about, Daryl, that's so important is that you're working with other companies within the industry. You're establishing those long-term relationships. You're finding out who you don't like to work with, but you're also finding out who you do want to have those long-term relationships with. Ida, in the Michigan Cannabis Industry Association, you have all of the 5 noble industries represented, plus you have ancillary industries too, isn't that right?
Correct. Yep.
So really, what you're talking about
to encompass everyone in the industry.
And you have meetings and regular opportunities for people to network so that they can meet folks that they wouldn't ever have normally had an opportunity to, and maybe discover services and products that they didn't know they need, and discover that they do need them.
Yep. Our conference actually is coming up July 21st, 22nd, 23rd. It's our biggest networking event of the year.
And you must be a member of the organization to attend. Is that right?
Yes, it's a members only event.
All right. And if people that are watching want to become a member of the Michigan Cannabis Industry Association, how could they do that?
Very simply, they could go to our website. It's www.micia.org, or you can call and I will help walk you through the process from getting signed up.
Mm-hmm. And not to be too contradictory, but last year, not fitting that definition, Daryl Stavros snuck in with Laith El-Sadi.
Got up there.
When you got 300 people, it's easy to
celebrities.
Well, it's kind of nondescript.
Guy, when you guys hire him, I always come.
Oh,
somebody's got to carry the guitars.
But you should probably have a conversation with Daryl later on about the industry association. This is more philosophically aligned with the way Daryl does business, and obviously these other players.
Absolutely.
Yep. And isn't it true, Ida, that there are certain people that maybe are interested in MICIA membership, but just aren't a real very good fit for your organization, and sometimes you just maybe don't take people in?
That does happen occasionally, and that's, our executive director's call. Again, we try to encompass everyone in the industry, and sometimes it's hard to encompass everyone. So,
well, it's good to know, though, because there are certain people out there that would just take anybody's money no matter what. But when you're a little more discriminating, that means a little bit more to the members of your group.
Yes, yeah, and we have principles that we stand on, so that's important for our members.
Well, and we're seeing the expression of those principles right now. When Robin Snyder speaks out in the newspaper in a pro-cannabis caregiver way, I'm sure she feels like she has the support of all 350 plus members behind her, because it's a topic that has been discussed. And you have an executive committee, and they have made an agreement, and this is what you're acting on.
And it was based on a resolution of that committee. It was a strong statement, and I think again, a lot of us really appreciate that position, and that's very helpful.
Well, and when all of our members basically started out as caregivers, I mean that right there is the testimony in itself. I mean, you can't get rid of a system that essentially was built for patients.
It's difficult for people who aren't in the cannabis industry to recognize some of the things that Steve Linder says as not being factually accurate. I'm trying to be nice and not get myself sued, but some of the things Steve Linder says don't necessarily match up with what we know as reality, but they can be pretty seductive. But people in the industry know that there's no history of illness from caregivers. We don't have to peel back the number of plants available, the number of caregivers too. So it's important, in my opinion, for people like Daryl, for people like Russ, Jim, Jamie, to stand up, and the MICIA to stand up and say, look, what's being said is not the majority opinion within the industry. This is a small group of people who are speaking from a position of seeking advantage, and this isn't necessarily the way the ball bounces in the world.
Well, and I would say that's the nice thing about hearing that they have 300 and some members, because should the MCMA language that you talked about earlier get any traction with any legislator, I think that the opposition to that is much greater than the support for it, and certainly within the industry. And I think that the legislators might not be aware of that.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
It's a money thing. I mean, these guys are, it's about, people like Linder spending that money, and that's what they do.
One of the problems with lawmakers is they don't have very many people speaking to them. And oftentimes the only people that speak to lawmakers are lobbyists who are paid to be in Lansing every day. However, organizations like Michigan NORML and Americans for Safe Access are organizations that can help give an individual a larger voice by making them part of something bigger than just themselves. We're joined right now by Brandy Zink, who is the president, I believe, of the Michigan chapter of Americans for Safe Access. Welcome to the broadcast, Brandy.
Brandy.
Hello,
Hi,
everyone.
Brandy.
Thank you. Hi, nice to see everyone. Thank you for this important discussion.
So when we talk about caregivers not having representation in Lansing, it's a fact. And oftentimes we show up when bills are being debated in committee, but it's really being there when bills are being written and in that formative process, which is where you can have the most impact. Oftentimes when things are committed to words and introduced into the legislature, it's more difficult to get them changed. Brandy, you've been working in federal realms as well as in state-based realms in a couple of different states in order to change laws in ways that we would appreciate. How difficult is it to get a lawmaker to change their mind once they've got their heart set on something?
Well, that's a big question. I don't assume that anyone has ever had their mind completely made. When they hear a patient's story, when they really hear a heart connection, I think that that's a moment that the compassion route, because sometimes science isn't enough, sometimes logic wasn't enough. But when they were touched in their own heart, or maybe they had a moment of conscious, they had a come to Jesus moment or some kind of personal connection. I think that's when I've seen the ones who I would have thought were our strongest opponents now become supporters. So it's essential that our represented people hear from the patients and the caregivers directly. It's important that they're represented, and many times I know that people are afraid. You know, there was a target on your back when you became a caregiver or a patient. You entered that system, and it was an act of courage to do so. You know, versus the market where we existed before, when we couldn't be in the sunshine, where we were a black market before we were even an industry. Activism is what created this industry that now exists. And so sometimes we think that because we're legal, you know, job's done. Well done, guys. And yeah, man, we did an amazing job. But we have to keep that going. And I think the difference between the companies that are patient focused are the ones who are going to be the most successful because that's why they exist. And then there's going to be the Walmarts of weed, and you can go to them if you want, or you cannot. I have a caregiver, and I have been a caregiver in the sense that I've had to take care of someone who's been ill. And that means, you know, having to do the other things that you're not going to get from the dispensary, you know, like having to help bathe someone or feed someone. You know, caregivers are people who are doing this out of love. If they're going to make a lot of money at it, then they've had a business, and they're, you know, that's not why they're in it, is for the making of the money. They're in it because they have someone they are caring for that has an ailment, you know. So that was one of our first fundamental rights that made Michigan important, and the reasons why we have the right to grow. So
Hey,
back
Daryl.
in the drafting of the Medical Marijuana Act, I came from Ohio, and we were worried about the raids that were going on at the time. So we wanted to make sure that a caregiver would be able to take care, and so the patient could have a continuous, uninterrupted supply. The growers had to be able to not be under the 99 plant limit, so the federal government wouldn't go after the caregiver. And so
And we
Michigan's
wanted to be
very
thousands
wide,
and thousands of them.
and it's very important that we keep it.
Right, it was purposeful to have many across the state.
We need to protect
Instead
the
of just a
law that
few.
it was written, because it was written for wisdom. You know, they're. Oh, I'm sorry, Jamie. Your connection. I'm all garbled.
I'm sorry about that. I was trying to add on to what you're saying about how it was also purposeful for there to end up to be thousands of caregivers throughout the state, making it more difficult to root out the activity, as opposed to just putting just a few large things, as people have been trying, as we've been discussing here. And then, Rick, you said you were going to ask Daryl?
Well, actually, Brandy was mentioning how she was a caregiver in the sense that she had fed and bathed patients and things. I just want Daryl to note that if a dispensary decides that they're going to offer a service where they bathe me and feed me, I'm absolutely going to that dispensary, baby.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I'm walking in with bucks in my pocket, okay? So think about it.
To all my patients, that
Well,
won't
you know,
be happening here.
But when you're an old man in
We can
diapers,
dream.
maybe, you know, you'll appreciate the caregiver.
You don't have to be an old man in diapers for Daryl. He'll carry you upstairs if you're naked sleeping on the staircase.
I heard that about him.
Well, I mean, it doesn't mean he shouldn't have a diaper. It just didn't happen to have one on. So, but Brandy, at ASA, we want to make sure that somebody who needs cannabis for, see if she comes back on. But anyway, we'd like to keep as many avenues for access to people available as possible. She's gone. Hopefully she'll agree with that if she comes back. But that is one of the things that ASA stands for. And that's why it has not really taken issue with things outside of a commercial market or anything like that, you know, so.
I know you have a limited amount of time. Is there something you wanted to say as to wrap up, and then I know we'll give you the grace of leaving properly?
I just want to say thank you for having me on, and this is a really important topic, and thank you for talking about it and bringing it to light. And you know, I just hope everyone understands, again, the core are the patients. Mm-hmm. It's a medicine, you know, and the dispensaries that are operating, that are licensed, again, we're caregivers, and it's all about helping each other.
Ida, you do a broadcast similar to ours. Could you tell our viewers about it and how they can watch that each week?
So that's on Wednesdays at 2:00. It's CannaCast. And what we do is we interview our licensed cannabis business owners, just getting to know their stories and their background and why they're in this industry.
And how can they find that?
We are live on Facebook, YouTube. It's on our Facebook page.
And Russell Chambers was on not too long ago, so go look at a recent episode and hear some more.
We're taking the month of June off, so we'll be off for June and we'll pick back up in July.
And your previous episodes are available for viewing either on your Facebook page for the Michigan Cannabis Industry Association, or I assume a YouTube channel maybe?
On YouTube, and then also they're on our website as well.
Beautiful. Yeah. Thank you, Ida Pearl Lee, for joining us. One of the principals of the Michigan Cannabis Industry Association, and a legend in her own right, as far as being a mom of a sick child who certainly helped positively influence the way that laws came about in Michigan. Thank you for your participation.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Hey,
So,
Rick, I just want to point out, I just got a text from Oz, which means they're watching this broadcast. They said, for God's sake, keep Rick out of the dispensary.
Especially if he has a towel with him.
oh, I see how the worm is turned all of a sudden, right? Oh,
Man.
I just want to be bathed. I just want to be fed. I mean, is that so wrong? Gosh.
That was Kevin Grace, by the way.
Listen, thanks so much for all of the things that we've talked about today. Daryl, thanks for giving us your time. I don't know if you have to take off soon or whether you can stay with us a little bit longer, but for all the years of service and for the 3 that you're about to give, thank you so much from our bottom of our hearts.
I appreciate it, guys. I do need to sneak out, so thank you for everything. And, we'll talk soon. Hopefully I'll see you guys up here at the house soon.
You're going to be staying there for a weekend this next month, it looks like.
Yeah, exactly. We'll pitch you at 10.
All right, sounds good.
Thanks again.
Take care, guys.
See you, man. Thank you.
So we talked a little bit about Americans for Safe Access. Michigan NORML is a very active consumer organization for the cannabis industry. Adam Brook and I are current board members. We have a couple of incoming board members. Colin, what is that you just did with your nose there, dude? I don't. Okay, but
I'm about to sneeze, I think.
Okay.
What did you do?
Right.
I missed it. Do it again.
Rewind and figure
Something
it
that
out.
we normally don't make a spectacle out of and just allow a person to have to do their thing when they need to. But we're choosing to
we never
put a lot of attention on him for it anyway, apparently.
It was unique and remarkable. My point, though, was that I think we have Deborah and Colin as incoming Michigan NORML board members. We'll announce more later on. But we have a whole plethora of people here from this organization. Let's talk a little bit about what we do. Adam, you want to go ahead and talk about Michigan NORML a little bit, sir?
Oh, sure.
You're in the headlights there.
I am. Well, no,
technology. I can't hear anybody, and then I get jumped off. So I don't know.
I can hear you though. I can definitely hear you. I don't know if you can hear
you.
I can hear you now.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Can you see us now, Brady? Are you good?
I can hear everybody but Rick.
Oh, well, that's
wow.
okay.
How'd you manage that?
Intentional.
Holy shit.
That seems
I
intentional.
knew something funny was said though, because I could see all of you laughing.
That means it was me that said it.
About the website. How do we join ASA? How do we become an ASA member? Go to safeaccessnow.org. And that's how you can join ASA. We really need our patient and caregiver voices to be heard. We have a place at the table. Without your voice, the legislators aren't really going to do much in your favor without you standing up and speaking out. And ASA, we encourage you, we empower you, we give you all of the tools that you need to make it really easy. So if you sign up and get on an email list, and if you want to join ASA and become a paid member, that helps to support all of the amazing work that's being done. We have the annual reports, we do surveys, we contact legislators. We have our monthly meeting for Michigan chapter is every third Wednesday. And it's from 7:30, or yes, is it 7 to 8:30?
Yeah, and they've been pretty cool. We've had some really good information on those, so they'll be good.
Jamie,
and-
remind Brandy that Asa was instrumental in getting cannabis added to the Irma Pharmacopoeia. She'll talk about that.
Right.
Okay, so I don't know why I can't hear everybody. There's a technology glitch.
So it was a good.
So,
So Rick, the
make sure
person you
that
can't hear, can you hear
sign up
me,
for the email
Brandy?
list,
Okay.
then you'll know when to call.
We'll
and
talk about that
contact the
later.
legislator.
Hey,
And you'll
Brandy.
know when the
Okay.
Can you hear me, Brandy?
Flushing Township.
Can you?
I think she can hear nobody now.
Okay.
Brandy, we're going to try this again, but the point is, we care about patients having access, and when people try to take it away, we stand up on behalf of them. When we work with organizations like Michigan Normal, who also care about consumers, and we make sure that the bad guys do not win.
ASA's been around a long time too. I remember at Omaha Milton, we had the brochures from ASA that were specific to people's ailments.
Yeah,
Whether
that was
it
cool.
be-
You guys did have a
Yeah, it
library out there.
was fantastic.
Steph Shearer appeared at home.
The information
She came
that they
home.
provide.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's all true.
Yep.
Adam's happy that he got off the hook for having to talk about Michigan.
Oh, I don't want to talk about Michigan Normal.
Make him do it now.
I'm good now. Yeah.
Yeah, go on, do it now.
I think it's the Wi-Fi signal or the satellites
man.
in space.
We love
but,
the fickleness of the
we're
internet.
2,800 members plus
Here we
strong,
go.
growing in
Keep
Michigan.
talking.
Yeah, that's what I would do.
Brandy, it's not working out. We're going to acknowledge how awesome ASA is, and that people can sign up at Safe Access Now, and that we have our monthly meetings, and that we look out for patients. And we're now going to like kind of talk about normal a little bit. So we'll move on to that.
Yeah,
And Mr.
Adam's
Hashbash will talk about
a bit.
the work that Michigan Normal does and can do for a situation like this. Adam Brook.
Adam's
Mr.
dying to
Hashbash.
speak.
I just
Look
want
at
to
him.
welcome you folks to one of the greatest scripted moments. I'm sure this has all been scripted again.
I would never script where someone couldn't hear me. Come on.
All right. So Michigan Normal is a public interest group that represents the consumer. It's a consumer-based advocacy group. And we've been around since the 70s as a national organization. And the Michigan chapter here has been active through the whole legalization process in different formations over the years. As Rick mentioned earlier, Matt Abel is leaving us, and some other board members are leaving us. And we're bringing in some new talent, I guess you might call it. But we do things like we have a lobby day. We're active. I would assume if this caregiver thing gets any traction, we would have a lot to do with this. But that's what Michigan Normal's about. We get together at Hash Bash. We have back in the days of non-COVID, we had a couple meetings throughout the year where we gathered in large groups. But
Adam, another thing Michigan Normal's been known for, especially during the run-up to the legalization program, was every year sponsoring a survey by Epic MRA, where we would gauge public acceptance for the legalization proposal. And it was a very useful tool, not only for advocacy, but also for the news media as well. So a steady increase, 3 to 4% every single year as we moved up in time. And that really made it possible for us to convince certain people that 2018 was a legitimate time for us to run legalization and not to wait till 2020. We had these surveys from an unimpeachable source that showed that Michigan was ready. And it was very valuable. And I think as Michigan Normal, it's probably something we're going to get back to.
well, yeah, no, that's that polling was certainly important in bringing forth the legalization message and timing, but that polling is also what backed up what we knew to be true. I mean, we knew this, but it legitimized it, and it made it so that we were capable, and not just out there as grassroots activists, but people who actually knew what they were talking about and could show the improvement over
It demonstrated it. Yeah, everyone successively got better. It was
Each
perfect.
year. Yep.
So, and you know, Normal's been around for a long time. The people involved in Michigan Normal have been around for a while. We are the oldest organization in Michigan to do any of this over the years. And there's been all kinds of chapters throughout the state. There's local chapters that can be formed if people are interested. It's not that hard to form a chapter. You
A couple good active ones out there right now.
Board, and there's a way to set that up. But it's one of the best brand names, if you ask me. And Rick will tell you, I harp about that in our board meetings all the time. I see Normal as a brand that we need to protect because it's so useful. And if any of all you people work out in public, and if you were to ask the people you come into contact with, name some of the organizations that legalized pot in Michigan, I think you'd hear the name Normal many times. And we get credit because people don't know of other names of organization. That's how important our brand is.
And there's good people.
And as a brand, because we represent the consumer, our motives are pure. I mean, we're out there. What is an issue for you? That's what we will embrace.
Our revenue source is people. You know, at $15, $25 memberships a year, that's where we make our money. We don't have corporate endorsements. We don't have anything like that. I'll say too that in Michigan nowadays, there's a ton of voices trying to speak out and get attention. And one of the ways that media knows which of the voices to listen to, and legislators know which of the voices to pay attention to, is based on reputation. And when we make a statement as Michigan Normal, I think that gets more attention than an organization that maybe just launched. So it's incumbent upon us to be more active and make more statements and make sure that what we're stating really is the way that consumers feel, and not just some kind of fluff statement just to get our name out there so that we can say that we participated. It actually has to be a meaningful statement. And I know Jamie's on the leadership of Americans for Safe Access, and they represent specifically the medical community, medical patients, and that. And I'm sure that that's important for them too, Jamie, right?
Oh, definitely. Again, the more avenues for access, the better for those who need cannabis. I mean, I think it's one of the things that Ida talked about, and other people in our comments, that there are only so many different avenues really to successfully get the kind of medicine at the time needed for some of these situations. They don't want to cut anything off that could possibly circumvent that from regularly taking place as much as possible. So,
I got a quick question. On last week's show from Matt Abel, was that comprised of all the presidents of Michigan Normal, like since its inception?
No.
Who was missing?
Was Bob Wood ever a president? I know there's somebody back from before then.
We talked about that.
Prior to Reverend Steve, there was a person who was, because it went from Tim back to Reverend Steve, Matt, and then to Matt Abel. But prior to Tim, there was someone, and I can't recall who that was.
Yeah,
but at least the past three.
Was it Christine?
It was like an all-star cast for.
And obviously, you guys are sticking on to continue to lead the group through. Right. So we had a lot of the history here coming on, and we're going to move into the future.
And I've actually been on the board twice. I was on the board at the beginning and then later on. So. But we, it's normal. It's all the rage now. People are fascinated by marijuana law, and if there's going to be any change, we would have to let the people know, right? And I can see that anything that affects the consumer that's what's going to be popular. I don't believe that if the license industry needed something, anybody would care. I think when it affects the consumer and the caregiver and the common person, that's where people are going to get involved, and that's where people are going to stand up and say, hey, what are you trying to do? We don't like that.
we know that there'll be an effort later this year when the licensing programs are combined, an effort to limit licenses in the state of Michigan. There's cultivators already saying that there's too much cannabis in the system. They can't make enough money. They need to not allow new cultivators. They need to not expand the current base in order to control supply. And that's not really the way the system's set up. And we will need business advocates to talk about that at that particular time. And we, as consumer advocates, Asa, Michigan Normal, we are speaking about things that specifically affect us as consumers. This is our lane, to use Adam's term from earlier in this broadcast. This is where we're at. This is where we're experts. And if we don't raise our voices in support of patients and caregivers now, we may miss the only opportunity we have to do so. The goal here, remember, is to not introduce any bill that would potentially compromise the caregiver system, not to beat something that's already been introduced. If we can influence people to not even put it in writing, to not even put it before the lawmakers, then we've done our job. If we don't see anything from these guys, that's a win for us.
Right.
Thank you, Mary.
So I want to point out too, traditionally, and it's been tried, there hasn't been an ongoing purely caregiver interests organization to continuously have a voice at the table. I mean, it's a lot of our organizations that we just discussed now and others, have taken up that cause from time to time when necessary and now. But I do know, and we're going to see how it develops, that there are some, maybe this is strong enough, maybe there's been enough, maybe the threat is big and it's being looked at again. There are people trying to put together another caregiver organization. Interested in how that pans out.
The only problem, and not to be a naysayer, is that there's 30,000 caregivers. If you're going to have a caregiver association, how many people are you going to get to be members? I mean,
well, it's been tried many times, and
I know.
There's nothing that's been ongoing, so I don't really know.
I didn't tell us that they had 300 and some members, right?
Mm-hmm.
Out of a possible how many?
Good question. I'm not sure how many licensees there are in the state.
But they're not even about licensees. They got ancillary businesses and everything. I'm just saying they've got 300 out of who knows.
It's just
we're talking about 30,000 people. How many are going to become active in a caregiver organization? I mean, I would hope many. I
agree, but
I just think that could be a real issue. That
10%.
We're going to check in on that. See how it
like
develops.
MICIA, they have 300 members. So
right,
10%
but if
of 30, that would be
if
great.
they have 1%, that would be a huge number.
Yeah,
it'd be great.
Which is great.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to point out. That it's important that these organizations form, because there's going to be the requirement of not just the caregiver organizations, but all these other supplemental organizations, because not one of us is going to have the firing power that these big spenders have.
Many
So
hands.
it's a real threat, I mean, for sure. But I've seen some people. I've seen a range of like, oh, we totally predicted this, and of course, there's
How difficult
not
was that?
surprised that they're continuing to try to advantage themselves.
it's
I mean,
been going ongoing.
it feels like the ghost of Randy Richardville
Yes.
haunting us.
Former Senate Majority Leader, foe of cannabis, and man, I made tap out in the middle of a committee meeting. Randy Richardville. That's right.
I've debated him on Let It Rip. He was one of my adversaries.
Greensley.
He showed up looking like a good humor man. He was in like a white suit and shit. Really weird.
You can tell he's worried about his image when he's wearing a pure white suit. He doesn't want to seem to
my
be
God.
the bad guy, but he's going to deliver
Isn't
evil.
that- Wasn't his chief of staff responsible for that group that started that we were mentioning earlier? Was it MCR or whatever?
No,
I think that was
NRC. That was Tim Beck's group.
I think was the he was from Jones's office.
Maybe I'm
Paul,
thinking of
what was that
another
guy's
group.
name? Paul Wayland. He was a state rep. It was him, Tim, and somebody else. Who was it, Jamie? Besides those two,
Sandra
maybe.
McCormick or something like that. So,
Yeah, and she's from Jones's office.
okay.
Yeah, but for sure it was Tim. It was definitely Tim and Paul Wayland.
And then, so
Paul-
there was
Paul
even
was
Keith
huge.
Stout, who we had on last week. These guys had, this kind of, I would call it old school philosophy that when there's an opportunity to be able to make the concrete gain of there being ultimately stores open that will sell to people 21 and over, and they can walk out and not look over their shoulder and worry about being busted for it. It doesn't matter who makes the money. We'll improve on that later. We at least need to make this move while we have the opportunity to. Tim was one of those people, but I think, and so was Keith for a while. He agreed that he changed his mind at one point when I had a conversation with him, and he was in Ann Arbor. But I think many of us knew, fuck that. And obviously the people of Ohio, we're pretty clear. Like, we can do better, sooner than having to wade through all that bullshit. And,
well,
and
it goes to show that
man.
people listen. When you put the facts, people will hear them, but you have to get facts out there. So.
And facts are best received when they come from trusted sources.
Exactly.
That's why NORML and ASA, as national organizations with good reputations, this has to be a good source of some of this data. Now, we know that the Michigan Cannabis Manufacturers Association is in the process of having a commission finished, which is a survey of potential illegal cannabis sales in the state of Michigan. They're trying to show how incredibly large illegal cannabis sales are and how we should take pity upon them and try and rectify this by cracking down on the black market. But in reality, it's going to show exactly the opposite. It's going to show the market potential that they have, that they can achieve on their own if they have good business practices.
Right.
Nobody wants to rekindle the war on drugs. It doesn't matter how big the unregulated marketplace is. Police don't have any zeal for it anymore. The citizenry doesn't want it. There's no health organization pushing for any of this, and neither are law enforcement guys. This is just business trying to force their will upon the legislature. It's ugly.
No, because they know it's a huge market. And that's, if you're going to go after the illicit market,
you'll never win. Look at the war on drugs. All it ever did was make cannabis more accessible and less expensive.
Right.
Again, it's kind of an exposure of not understanding how this works.
Correct. And with all these different laws and regulations and rules and this permit and that permit, and law enforcement looks at it and goes, we don't care. These people are nuts. They don't know what they want. They're just treating it different now. So, I mean, I just don't see what could be gained by ever pushing anything going backwards, as Jamie says, anything. I understand the zoning ordinances and the local control issue, and I understand where that comes from and how they try to take control and things like that. But I don't understand the whole why somebody who's in the game would push anything against anybody that's in the game. I mean, there's plenty for everybody.
It seems so straightforward to somebody who doesn't understand what's going on the ground and has seen what's developed here and been part of the culture or aware of it, or even kind of like is worried about the nature of the plant, the product that they're about ready to be involved in, and all things associated with it. If you don't have any of that, it's real easy to believe that any activity outside of the commercial world where you make your money is a threat to the huge investment.
As we've talked about before, too, there's an external factor that's driving these people to do something they probably even look at and know that it's not going to work themselves. And that's this financial need that was predicated by these bad commercial financing deals that these people got into. And you see logical people acting in an illogical way. It's because there's an outside force affecting their decisions and their actions. And in this instance, it's their shareholders. It's the financial need they put themselves in. Here's the thing about any industry. Some people succeed and some people don't. We have to be okay with some people not being successful, meaning losing their businesses. We have to be okay with some people saying, I couldn't cut it because I made bad deals, so I'm going to sell my assets off to somebody else, or I'm going to transfer my license to somebody. I'm going to take a buyout and let someone else take a shot at it. It's okay. We cannot protect businesses from the eventuality of their failure. That's not a fair industry. It's not a free market ideal. It's not the way America's based on, and it's also not the way to secure a good environment for our patients to work with them. So, lawmakers oftentimes don't want businesses to fail because it means a loss of jobs. I say probably not. One guy goes down, there's still a need for that product and service. Somebody else rises to take their spot. It has to be okay for some people to fail. And, I don't get to choose who those people are. If I did, it would be a different game. Fact is, though, sometimes we can recognize who those people are before they fail. Watching them struggle to remain in business and the horrible things that they do to themselves and to others in order to remain in business, it's just sad to watch. And that's what we're looking at right now. People flailing about for any kind of a float while they're floating in the ocean.
But these people are very resourceful and influential, so that's why we are on guard.
Yes.
Keep this
Well,
up.
Vigilant.
And I will say Rick and I are going to be on the My Canacast show with Groovy and Canna Dave before too
Those
long
guys are
talking
great
about this
guys.
thing. Yeah, they're very cool. They were on here before. And we're also going to be on Smoke and Rope, I think next week with Ryan Basor and his crew and Tom Beller and company and Kevin Previs and talking about this thing too. So we're going to keep it up.
Don't forget that Adam does a broadcast each and every morning, and he talks about this. Adam, look at him. Come on, you know you do.
Every
You love
morning, I got to get out of bed.
Stick the dick. What is it called again?
No, it's called Dab and Stab.
Dab and stab.
Dab and
Something like
stab.
that.
Big dick.
Real.
That's an end of the show mistake.
He's
Whoa.
been waiting all night to say that.
Well, that's because Adam allows you to guess his blood sugar number in order to win a prize. And as gruesome as that sounds, I actually won a prize from Adam one time, and it was kind of cool. So you should participate.
This is. I'm sorry. I was trying to think of the Bergs from, of course, Medical Mondays, another great show,
Bill,
and of course, been covering this issue so well.
Stick the dick.
Stick the dick.
Jamie.
And we've been able to get the word out through that venue too a lot. And then the Michigan Bro Grow Show guys have been on there, and we've been using our network of these great Michigan podcasts and communicators from cannabis to get the word out on this.
Adam, how can they tune into your show every day if they'd like to?
every day on Facebook, ML Brook, 9 o'clock Monday through Friday, 10 o'clock Saturdays and Sundays.
You still doing those other video portals that you used to do too? You used to do some stuff?
Not so much. I go on Twitch once in a while, but a little bit of Twitter Live on occasion, but not so much.
Good for you.
But mostly Facebook Live at the moment.
Josh Maupin says Dab and Stab is daberific.
Yeah, he's a regular. I got a lot of regulars that follow me.
And he checks out a lot of the shows and gets a lot of information from many of these, and that's what I'm referring to. We have a lot of really good ones.
Right.
And we can talk about the same thing in each one because some of these things are important and we have a little bit different perspective sometimes. More information.
Jim and Colin do the Entheo show, which they should talk about a little bit right now as we're winding the show down. Jim, go ahead.
Entheo show will be next Friday, July 11th. Stay tuned.
June 11th.
June 11th.
Did I say July? Pardon me. Last show. Who do we have on last show, Colin? Help me out here, will you?
Let me think. I can't remember either. I can tell you the show before for some reason.
Well, it's a really awesome, important show, and everybody can look at those old episodes.
It was Shelly. Shelly was our guest. That's why it seemed like it.
Yeah,
It was a nice, familiar, great conversation you have. It didn't stand
we were
out.
supposed to have somebody else, and we had another guest not show up. That's why we are not. We hardly remember.
Yeah, it was a little bit
It had
shorter.
nothing to do with the nature of the show itself.
But if I could please speak on the September 19th at 11 a.m. at the Diag at University of Michigan is the Entheo Fest, and that's a celebration of plant medicines. We're going to have great speakers. Senator Jeff Irwin will be there. State Representative Yusuf Rabi will be there. We have the incredible, what's his name? William Picard.
Leonard Picard, yeah.
Yep, who will be there as well.
He's the LSD. He's arrested for LSD back in the like 2000s or something. He wrote that book about fentanyl. So
yeah. Did a lot of research. Got his PhD. Yeah. He's going to be one of our speakers.
Also, I was going to say with our most recent episode, it was Reads and Weeds, and they talked about like psychedelic books that are. Shelly is just released an episode about psychedelic books and everything, and she's also going to have
coming back to you.
William Picard on her show soon.
Cool. Right on.
Jamie, Deb, do you have any final thoughts? I know we're just about out of time here.
I have no thoughts at all.
I
Final or
doubt it.
otherwise.
I'm trying to think, but nothing happens.
Yeah.
Look what a great subject we've talked about today. What a great set of guests that we've had. We had Russ, we had Brandy, we had Daryl. Shelly came on for a brief time. I mean, we've had a lot of interesting folks today. And of course, Ida was our co-host from MICAA.
And next week we are going to get in depth onto the Rainbow Farm story, and I'm really interested in that. I know a lot of the headlines. I know some of the stuff. Been able to have some good conversations about it, but there's a lot there, and these people really care about this place. We're going to hear about it next week in depth.
Cool.
Sounds good.
All right, everybody. Anybody else want to leave us with words of wisdom before we sign off? Another great show. Appreciate everybody.
Appreciate you guys. Thanks for having me.
All right.
Appreciate
Check out
you
More
having
Funny
me.
Folks tomorrow at 1 p.m. on Facebook.
Right on. All right, everybody. Cabbage Cafe signing off. See you guys.
See y'all.